Hey guys, and welcome to Coffee with Carda, where we will talk all things music and life with the amazing people involved in our industry. We will chat about our experiences, where we are currently at in our careers, and how we're looking to grow and leave our mark on the industry. I hope you enjoy the show. Let's get straight into it. All right, what's up, guys? Welcome to episode 4 of Coffee with Carda. Today, we are joined by another awesome guest. We're going to be diving into all things mixing and mastering, which I'm super keen about. Just right off the bat, I've loved doing this podcast to date, and if there's any feedback on what you guys want to hear more of, just hit me up on Instagram at Carda Music or Facebook Carda Music, because I want this to be I want to give you information you guys want to hear, and I appreciate any feedback at all, because that's what we're about. And I've had some awesome guests on the show and have some awesome guests coming up. So we want to talk things that people want to hear, and that's what we're going to be talking about today, because mixing and mastering is so crucial in any artist's career, any songwriters, anyone in the music industry's career. It is pivotal. And who better to talk about it than Nick Lorenzo from Panorama Mastering, who just mix and masters records daily for a living, absolutely smashes it. Nick, welcome.
Hey, mate. Thanks for having me on.
Nah, no worries at all. I want to get super technical on this one. My last few podcasts have been kind of broad, and we've talked about songwriting and stuff, but this one I want to go nerdy. I want to go plugins. I want to go your process. I want to get in it. So before we jump into that, what are you drinking? Are you tea, coffee? I mean, I have to ask. I know what you're going to drink, but I have to ask this as a,
No.
it's my initial segment, so I've got to do it.
That's all right. It's coffee.
Beautiful.
Lavazza. The coffee which landed me good stead in my internship positions. It was really funny.
Really?
What happened was, we were in Abbotsford at the time at the Avery. One moment, I got to sip this. You can't hold a cup without sipping it.
Yeah, beauty.
Oh man, that's some good shit. No, what it was so in Abbotsford at the studio, and everybody knows when people are in sessions, they're going to have either lots of coffee, scotch, or booze, more booze. That's unless somebody's doing lines of coke, but we don't want to talk about that on the podcast. But no, seriously. So what's going on is, in Abbotsford, they got this coffee maker like the mocha pot, which we all know, and they asked me if I know how to use it. I'm like, what do you mean, do I know how to use it? I came out of the womb knowing how to use it. I'm Italian, for God's sake. That's just how we do it. So it was but that kept me in good stead, because I made the best coffee in all my internship and assistant positions. Even when there was an espresso machine in my assistant position, I knew how to do it. So that was just,
That's
if
funny.
you want to get good with somebody in the mixing and mastering industry, just learn how to make coffee and you've got a job.
Oh shit. That is so good. That's such a funny story. It's actually funny because a few people I've had on here have been like, I started internship and started doing the coffee rounds and stuff for people, and it's actually funny how you would make quality coffee and you get close with the big boys or girls.
People love it.
People love, mate. Good coffee. Unreal.
Mate, that's a moniker now. My clients in America, because I just came back from America in January. It was fucking horrible, the coffee over there. So what I started doing for my regulars, I started buying them coffee pots and coffee and getting them delivered to their houses.
Oh, that's unreal.
Because I'm like, you guys are fucking coffee. It was atrocious. And there was one sort of good place I went with some Aussie boys, but other than that, no. So yeah, that's even today it's still buying me good gesture in and amongst the industry. Just good quality coffee. Not if you have a tea drinker on this podcast, you may as well stop it early. You just know that they're not on the end.
No, I agree. It is essential for any session and any start day of work. So I was gonna talk a little bit about like a snapshot onto how you got to Panorama, mixing and mastering your business. Is that where you started? Like, did you start an internship and then it went from there, or?
Yes. So what happened was I recorded my own bands in high school and my friends' bands and stuff, and then I started studying at uni. I'll give really quick snapshots so I don't bore people.
Yeah. Quick snapshots. What we're after. That's it.
So was at uni studying music industry, not audio. Wanted to try and figure out something to do in audio. Interned at a recording studio.
Yeah.
I sucked at it.
Okay.
So I'm like, I want to do anything in the music industry, publishing, PR, live events, I don't care, whatever. Just happened that I got an assistant position at a mastering studio. Loved the workflo.
How did you get that one? Just quickly?
It was actually soon after the internship. Right. And it was just, as in, just to quickly, briefly, how I got it.
Yeah.
How I got it is I just I probably did about 40, 50 emails.
Yeah, unreal.
Not just mastering shit, but everything, labels, publicists, everything. I just wanted to be in the thick of it. I didn't give a fucking shit what I was doing or how I was going about it. But that was just then I was there freelancing. Then too many people sitting on my bedroom floor while I'm doing a session. Built a studio, moved it over to there, and that's been the last 6 years now, just in this space.
Yeah, unreal. And you've built up your clientele from there. Just through, you started through word of mouth and it just ticked.
Yep, exactly.
Man, that's unreal. So I love it. So that is exactly the snapshot I was after, because I want to get into like things because I feel like artists starting out and even artists that are in the game for a little bit don't know much about the mixing and mastering kind of process. Because there's a lot of songwriters that kind of like will write a song and then they would kind of let the producer deal with it and they're not involved, or like, I just feel like it's so important and something that like everyone should at least know the fundamentals of, like the basics of. So if I'm an artist and I want to get a song mixed or mastered, what are the things I should consider before sending it to you? And what are some like common mistakes you see that artists will do?
Okay, so before mixing, do you love the track? Like, do you love the production elements? Do you love the sound of things? Because, mixing, we're working with the sound, we're manipulating it, we're changing it, we're trying to improve it. But at its core, the core elements, do they resonate with you?
Yeah.
There's no point bringing something into mixing to get fixed, even though that happens. You're sort of, selling yourself short, because mixing engineers want to be inspired when they hear the material. Like, I actually don't start until I hear the material and it's eliciting something out of me. So that's the main thing. I think people go, oh, my vocals don't sound good, it's a mixing thing. Well, do your vocals not sound good because of the way it's mixed, or is it because of the performance or the production of them? That's what you got to isolate. So, that's the one thing. Just be inspired by the music before you send it off. Because if it's not resonating with you, chances are it won't even resonate with other people or another mixing engineer.
Yeah, right. And will you ever like knock anything back if you think it can be improved?
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
All the time. And typically what it is especially for singer-songwriters, it's more so the production and sound design. They've got good composition. They have good or all right arrangements, but, the sound of their guitars aren't recorded well, or the drum samples they're using are a bit lackluster, or the pads they're using are just default Ableton ones, which are a bit one-dimensional. If they go with the producer, they'll be able to flesh out those ideas and really, go that extra mile before mixing.
Yeah, true. So it's all so that production stage, you're saying get that spot on before. And don't expect a mixing and mastering guy to just polish a turd, because it just never happens. You can only work with what you're working with.
No, you can only work with what you're working with. There's some mixing guys and dudes who are out there who are really astute producers as well.
Yeah,
so
right.
they can take it, they can develop, they flesh it out. Like even me with EDM stuff, before I start mixing it, if a kick drum's not sitting right with me or a snare drum's not sitting right, or I feel like the bass needs a bit more depth and saturation, what I'll do is before I even start the session is just work on the stems individually and get them feeling good for me. So I go, oh, wow, these stems are going to inspire the best out of this mix and also in me. So yeah, it's you know, that's sort of how it is before you start mixing. You really want to get something that has that just raw. I think the best way to say it is like a rough diamond. You want a rough diamond.
No, that's good. That's quality advice. I think a lot of, dude, myself included, I'll get in the like trap of like wanting to finish something, being like, the mixing guy will finish it. And then I have like someone else telling me, like my manager Dylan's like, dude, come on, like, let's get this before mixing. Like, let's not be lazy on this like 5%. Let's get it. And then mixing will just add the polish and shine. Like, don't be, lazy about it. So it's a great point you make. With your process, like, so when you've got something that you tick off and like you love the quality sound design and the production's there, what is your process? Like, what's the first thing you will do? You'll bring the stems in, or it's not always stems. Sometimes you use master a, flat, like 2-track.
So for mixing, what will happen is I'll make sure everything's named correctly. Because that doesn't always happen. So I always make sure everything's named correctly. And once things are named correctly, I'll move everything in, and there'll be two very distinct scenarios. Right. The first scenario is the demo mix is super demo, nothing's balanced. All they've done is put it together, got a vibe, and sent it off. And in those situations, I'll start mixing faders down. So I'll bring in the bass and the vocals, and then I'll start to build it up. Okay. The other situation is where I'm working with a producer, and these typically tend to be more experienced producers who do have their own mixing chops, and they've mixed a demo which the client really enjoys, but they want polished up. What I'll do is I'll get the stems in, but instead of starting with the faders all the way down, I'll start with them all at unity. So I'm listening to the same demo that the producer had. So what happens there is, instead of me going all the way back to the start to rebuild it, I'm building on all the work they've done. So all the things that they loved, they enjoyed, that they were cool with, and even if some of the things that they might not have been, I leave in, and that way I can move forward rather than stripping it all back, give me dry stems and all that sort of shit. Because reality is, experienced producers do things for a reason, and if a client's signing off on a certain reverb or delay, you want to keep that in for the most part.
Yeah, okay. I want to dive in. I want to try and dive in as much into this as possible, because I want to try and get more technical for people. I don't know, for people out there. So you get so if it's a demo, you'll bring everything down, what, like 6 dB or like 10 dB?
No, everything to so it's inaudible.
Oh, inaudible. And then and then you'll slowly start, you're working the kick and
things in. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And then if it's something that let's talk something that's been produced like to because I don't know if there's many, like, do you get a lot of, like, what do you get more of? Do you get more of demos?
More produced well.
Yeah. I thought.
Because typically the sort of that rough demo that isn't quite there, typically it comes in, and I'm pushing it back and going, hey, you should work with a producer because this still has to be fleshed out. If they've worked with a producer, it's where it is, and I'm bringing it in. And what I'm doing is as I said, I'm trying to move forward. So if I want to get technical here with the people listening, what will happen is I'm listening to it and I go, how can I make this sound the best at the master bus level? Okay, so I go, is it too bright? Is it too dull? Is it too punchy? Is it not punchy? So I get that master bus gelling everything together. So everything that I work on gets that gel, that overall mix needed. Then I'll go down to the group buses and I'll go, okay, what do the drums need? What do the synths need? What do the vocals need? And then after that, then I'll break it down again and I'll go, okay, so now I'm in the drums. What does the kick need? What does the snare need? What does the hi-hat. So I'll start from the very biggest picture, especially if you're working with a producer who's already spent time building that picture, and break it down into chunks. Because if you start from the smallest aspect of it, like a single kick drum, you lose that sort of gel and cohesiveness. Because I'm sure this has happened. I know you've worked on lots of records that you've went back and forth with mixing engineers for both good and bad, and you get something back sometimes that loses that original essence.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's the killer. And I've made that mistake plenty of times, and it's not really a mistake. It's just something that happens in the process of trying to get to that final stage.
Yeah.
So that's why I always start at the biggest umbrella and then micro my way in.
Right.
So I'm always very, very clear of what that original sort of sound was, rather than going in micro.
Yeah, okay. And you'll be in contact with the artist and say, hey, what do you like? Give me references, give me things you want this to sound like, etc.
Yeah, and typically what that is 2 or 3 really ambiguous out there references which make no sense, which is cool. I get it. People are inspired by different things which might not really resemble their music. And then there'll be their demo. Typically it's like a Frankenstein of all of the following, and what I have to do is I always try and make a really incredible version of the demo that they send through. And then once I've done with that, I'll go and A/B with the references. Because if I find I'm going to the references first, again, you can lose that original essence because you're trying to chase something that, I always try and keep focused on that original energy, because at the end of the day, when you're going through the mixing, I'm jumping around here a lot, but when you're going through the mixing, you're making a decision to say, hey, I'm ready to drop some big coin and wrap this record up and put it out. By the time somebody's got into there, they've made some pretty important decisions to get to there. So you don't want to lose those decisions.
Yeah, nah. Yeah, it's a big responsibility. Like it's such an important role. So you said you start with the master. So will you chuck like a limiter, like compressors on the master bus to get a feel?
No, it would be like I'll just listen to the whole track and I'll go, okay, this is too bright, this is too dull. Right. I'm not being as surgical as mastering. I'm being very broad stroke. I'm going, okay, there's a lot of mid-range, or this is a bit like it'll be EQ, compression, sometimes a bit of multi-band stuff going on. Just trying to fill out. I love using it at this stage, and I'm being so broadband. I'm using like pool text and stuff.
Yeah, right.
Because I'm just like what I'll do is, this is fun, like on the pool text, I'll go like down like 20, 30, 50, 60 hertz, whatever. Yeah. And I'll just crank it 12 dB there. And then I'll just flick between each of the frequencies, and I'm like, where am I feeling this sub? Am I feeling it about 30 or 60 hertz? I'm like, okay, it feels better at 30. And then I'll dial it all the way back down and only add like 2 or 3 dB. Even though that's a lot, especially with electronic music, it's cool to have that sort of big fucking boost in the bottom. And I'll do the same with the top end. I'll crank it 12 dB. It'll sound horribly harsh, but I'll just skip between like 12 kilohertz, 10 kilohertz, 5 kilohertz, whatever it is. And like, where does this really match up with what's going on in the mix? And just latch on to those, and they stay there. And then the compression is, with the compression, it's more multi-band. What I'm doing is I especially for contemporary music, I'm side chaining the compression to all the mid-range.
Right.
So none of the snaps of the snares or punches of the kick controls it, just the mid-range. I'll try and focus that EQ on the mid-range for the side chain around where either the vocal or the lead sits. And that can shift an octave or so. So, like if it's a male vocal, it'll be more like 400 to 1.5K. If it's like a synthy, cool, edgy lead, it'll be like 600 to 2K. And I'll just latch that in, lock it in, and that will sidechain my compression. So, it really helps the mid-range pop and hold without moving too much. And then the kick and snare doesn't get affected by the compression whenever it punches through.
So you're ducking the mid-range to give
I'm ducking the whole signal.
Yep.
But side-chained from the signal of just the mid-range.
You're ducking the whole signal, but side-chained. Oh, just from so is it everything in between those frequencies are side-chained?
Everything.
So nothing like So say from like 200 hertz down to 4K up is not sidechained.
Is not sidechained, but it's still getting compressed.
Yeah, okay. Why do you do that? Is that just like, do you find that just gives it more movement because that's where like a lot of the energy is in the track, kind of?
It gives it more movement in the bottom and top end, and allows the mid range to hold really well, because whenever that mid range gets a little bit hot, it compresses and holds it in, and the top and the bottom just don't affect that compression, that bus compression. So I can feed signals super hot into there, and everything tends to hold together. And I'm only it's only taking off like a decibel at the most.
Yeah. But the mid-range is where it can get muddy. Like a lot of the mids, because like a lot of what people don't realize with mixing, it's like EQ is like just so critical. It's just like there's so much shit you can take out with EQ and sidechain, like you're saying, like compression. So, and a lot of that sits in mid-range because everything's like your vocals, your synths, your like everything is in that mid-range. So it does make sense that you do that. What are your like plugins? Like, let's talk like favorite kind of plugins that you're loving and like what they do and how they help. What are you using at the moment?
So the default lo-fi plugin, like I'll just go off what I'm touching the most when I'm mixing, not necessarily where it sits.
Yeah.
So the lo-fi plugin by Avid on Pro Tools, that's like your default. It's just like a bit crusher distorter. I only do it like 0.2 out of, I'm not even sure what scale it uses. But I use minute amounts of it on the kick and the snare, and it just adds this little bit of mid-range edge which makes the drums pop. And I'm always using that there. Yeah. Always. The Shep CQ by Waves.
Yep. Heard of that.
I like that just because, I don't know, I like where this might sound stupid, I like where the different points are on each of the EQ bits. And when I boost and attenuate, I just sort of know the vibe. And the input and output on it emulates analog relatively well. So if I want to drive things and signals and get them a bit crunchy, I can do some cool things there. Not that I do that a lot, but at least I know that's always an option. The decapitator's on fucking almost on every parallel synth I do.
By Sound Toys.
By Sound Toys. That's
you put that on synths, do you?
Yeah, like paralleling synths and even parallel on basses.
So for those, sorry to cut you off. Parallel is like you get an audio signal and you duplicate it, and you often like compress it and like you'll distort it or you like saturate it heaps, and it'll just add thickness and like an extra depth to the original signal. So you've got like two signals, but one's like your kind of clean, nice one, like often the time, and then the other one's your fat, dirty, like compressed, hard one, and that kind of just smooths it out, all in one. Is that? Dive into that more.
The way I'm typically doing it for both bass and synths is I'll put in parallel. I'll filter out the frequencies I really love about the instrument or the channel.
Mm-hmm.
So it might be, I don't know, there might be a really cool synth and it's got this great upper mid-range edge between 2 and 6K or 1.5 and 4K or whatever. I'll filter that out with an EQ. I'll distort the hell out of it. I'll widen the fuck out of it. Then I will blend that signal back in so that energy that I really like gets spread between the speakers. And I do that even with basses, like the harmonics in the bass. Like not the sub and the low end, but the harmonics. If there's harmonics in a bass I'm really enjoying, it gets a bit lost down the line. So I'll tend to do this in parallel, and I can get it all around the ears of the listener, and it creates a really nice immersive feeling, and that sound really, the cool thing is you don't actually have to, because typically what happens is like, I want a little bit more of that lead, or I want a little bit more of that bass. And people are like, okay, well, we bring it up in volume, or we compress it, or we do something, and then it's too loud for everything. Whereas this is like a really subtle blend that gives things presence without actually having to go down the route of cranking something up in volume.
I like that. So you're finding the best frequencies in any instrument and then you're taking that out of the original signal and then bringing that in the actual parallel duplicated signal, and then you're affecting that, and that because that's the one that's the frequencies you like, and then you widen that, and you'll almost emphasize those frequencies because that's what you want people to hear.
Yeah, and it won't be across every channel. It'll just be across things I want to highlight. Like,
yeah, for sure.
If a track has a boring bass line, or a bass line, not even boring, but a bass line that isn't meant to take the center stage, then I'm not going to do it.
Yeah,
but if I'm hearing something that has to be sung or has to be tapped to or felt or danced to, that's just so important to the music itself, then I'll be like, okay, I really want to make sure this goes somewhere for the listener. So I tend to do that.
Yeah. No, that's a great little tip. What else can we dive into? I want to talk about vocals, because I mean vocals is a pretty, like, everyone like starting out with vocal chains and vocals, I was always like, how do you just get that crisp vocal, and how do you get it? What do you normally get your vocals sent dry or wet, or you like them both?
Depends.
Okay.
Really depends on the production.
Yeah.
If as I said, if the producer's really good, nailed it.
Yeah.
Wet.
Yeah.
If they haven't, dry. Really depends on what's going on there, because as you said, like, if I get it wet and the producers haven't nailed the effect or the way it should be feeling, it's really hard to get that nice crisp sound from the wet signal, because you've got so much else you're contending with. But if they have, like, I sort of keep it and run with it. But from a dry signal point, like what I've recently started doing, and this is something that I got off Andrew Sheps, is this idea of he's got I'll explain the buses. So you got two buses. One is your bus that takes in all your vocals. The other one is a parallel.
Yeah. And
those two blend into a combined bus of both those signals.
Right, so they combine.
So they combine into that bus, and that full bus then goes out to 5 effects buses. And I can't remember how he explained it, but I tend to understand it really well. Yeah. It's what was it? It was I can't remember the names.
The 5 effects. Is that what you're...
Yeah, the 5 effects. Wait a moment, let me just get me my session up, because
do that.
I want to say this once. I'm only going to get one opportunity to give you the full impact of...
No, get the session up.
So what it is so I explain those 2 buses, the normal one, the parallel one, and they blend into a main bus. Yep. Then that sends out a signal, and this is how I was able to... It's just sort of a thing for my brain. It's verb, slap, spread, spank, shine.
Love it.
That's what I labeled them.
Slap, spread, spank, shine.
Yeah. So the first one obviously is the... Sorry?
V quadruple S.
Yeah. So the first one is reverb, obviously. Yep. The second one, slap, is a slap delay. Yep. The spread is a sample delay between the left and right.
Like a ping pong kind of...
Yeah, like a very short, so like 32 milliseconds on the left and 58 milliseconds on the right, and then I sort of change that based on how much distance I want there to be in the spread or the stereo field. Mm-hmm. Spank is a 76, literally doing that, like all in, spanking the hell out of the signal. And the shine is the Aphex Vintage Exciter, because on
Waves.
Waves, on mode 1, cranked all the way, it adds this really interesting crystally edge, and then I'll just blend that in. So that's how I set it up. I got those ones. To be honest, I haven't mixed all week and all last week. I've just been mastering records, so I haven't had a chance to sort of keep that in my brain. But that's something I've started doing over the last couple of months, and it's worked really well. Like, I've been able to get really big sounding vocals easily.
Yeah. Well, because you've got everything separated in their own, like, kind of department. So, you know.
Yeah, it's like I want a bit more space, or I want it a bit more closer, or a bit more further away, or a bit more phasey and effecty, or a bit more shiny. It's just like, because once you dial in those plugins, it's like you just control the faders. So if the client's like, I want it a bit more shiny, I just get the shine one and bring that up. Cool. I want it a little bit more compressed. Okay, I've got the spank one. Pull that up. I want it a bit more spacey, reverb. Well, that's pretty obvious, but I don't have to then start dialing in new settings or tweaking things. I just have everything there and I can just control it with faders.
Yeah, and it makes it quick for revisions when people want revisions, because you can just go to that and give it to them straight away.
Yeah, it's really easy to work backwards from, because I know exactly what's affecting and how it's affecting it.
Yeah, for sure. So in terms of plugins, like what if you're like talking to a producer or like songwriter starting out, what's your like top, I don't know, like top few that you'd be like, you should like just lock that in, like get that?
I'm going to answer this for producers more so than songwriters.
Yeah,
because I think a songwriter can definitely get away with the stock plugins on Ableton, Pro Tools, Logic. They're incredibly powerful for what they are. So if you're a songwriter, I wouldn't waste a cent on plugins for mixing, unless you're like an electronic one and you're doing cool shit with side chains and stuff like that. But for most songwriters who are just putting their ideas down, I don't see a great investment there. But for producers, I'd say the Sound Toys Decapitator, the Sound Toys Echo Boy, Valhalla, Vintage Verb, which is incredible. What else? What else? I'd probably get a Pool Tech, whether it's a Waves one or the UA or whatever. They can go pretty far.
Is Pool Tech for top? That's really nice for top end, isn't it?
It depends. There are two versions of the EQ. So the first one that the actual Pool Tech unit released was a top and low end EQ. So you could affect all the low end, all the top end, and then they were like, oh well, they released something to fill the market for all the mid range. So there's another one which can do the upper and lower mid range. But I'm talking about like old school Pool Tech. They're all old school that are emulated. Like none of them, they're not redoing design. Like they're emulations, but they're not actually still out there designing new different Pool Techs. There's two main ones, and the one I would go for is just the classic one with I think it's I can't remember the name, but it's just got lots of fucking low end dial, lots of high end dial, and you can just crank shit in.
Yeah.
And number five, what would I, if I were a producer needing to mix some stuff, what would I get? Maybe a 76 or something. 76 is a pretty Swiss Army knives.
Yeah.
Which are good. But then even if you're in Pro Tools, you got they've got a 76 emulation, which is pretty decent.
Yeah. No kind of quirky cool ones that you've been using recently, like EQ. Do you use stock EQ from?
I've used whatever fucking. You know what I use? I actually use the REQ by Waves.
Yeah.
There's nothing, the Renaissance one, there's nothing special about it. It's just, I don't know, I type in REQ, which means I get there quickly, and then I just drag what I want and drop where I want. Like, if you're going to get an EQ and you're going to be really funny about learning it and trying to understand it, probably the Pro Q3 that FabFilter have out.
Yeah, that's what I use.
Yeah, which is incredible. It's super powerful. But for my brain, it's like when I'm mixing, it's like I want something bright. Yeah. That's all I want to do. If I need to get surgical about it, I'll do that in my own way. But if I'm like just trying to get a vibe on something, it's like I want bright. Boom, crank the top, and I want boomy. I don't want this. I just sort of go in and I literally use the mouse.
Yeah.
Just to drag and move it, and it sounds good there. That's cool. I don't know, because you're making a million decisions a day. I just don't want to be bogged down by the 64 different parameters on Pro Q between the phase and the shelf and the filter shape, and it's cool. Don't get me wrong, and it definitely has its purpose. But for my simple brain, at least when I'm mixing, it's a bit too much.
Yeah, nah, fair call. Oh, that's sick. Well, I think a lot of them are essential for producers for sure. The Sound Toy stuff is one I recently jumped on, and that was a great call. I feel like you're always so hesitant to buy new plugins because they're expensive and you just don't know if you're going to get your money's worth, but I think the more people hear the same sort of plugins, the more they'll be like, nah, fuck it. Like, I just got to invest.
Well, you can trial them. That's the first thing.
Yeah, that's true.
Trial them. And what a funny affair I have with FabFilter is whenever they release updates, I always re-download the trial and see what they did on the updates until I like it.
Yeah.
And I had the FabFilter multiband, and I was really liking it, but I didn't get a chance to really use it in the 30 days. I only used it during the last week.
Right.
And I just emailed them, and I'm like, hey, can you extend it an extra month? And they're like, yeah, no worries. So they gave me a code to extend it an extra month. So that way I got it to, I was working with it to a point where I'm like, okay, I need this in my arsenal now. And then I bought it. But most companies are pretty cool. As long as, like, put it this way, the person that's going to steal off them isn't going to be emailing them to extend their trial if they genuinely need it.
Yeah,
so, like, my thing would be just download trials. If it's not enough time, email them and go, hey, I got to use this a couple of times. It was cool, but I didn't get to explore a few things. Can I have an extension? And they'll be relatively nice. I would be very hard-pressed to find a company that would sort of push back against that.
Yeah, that's it. Nah, for sure. Well, okay, so we've gone into mixing. Let's just quickly touch on mastering before we wrap it up. What are your decisions? Because probably similar to mixing, but like mastering, you do a lot more mastering, don't you?
Yeah, a lot.
You do a lot more mastering. So what's some things when you get a mixed track that you're thinking of in mastering?
Just what happens when it leaves this room. Like, it's going to go on Spotify, it's going to go in a club, it's going to go in a car, on radio, whatever. Like, what happens there? Who's going to listen to it? How are they going to listen to it? You know, my job isn't necessarily to reinvent the wheel when I'm mastering, but I have to be very conscious of everybody else who's going to listen to it. So if somebody else is going to listen to it in a club, are they going to dance to it? Are they going to sing to it? Is it going to make them want to dance or sing to it? If they listen to it on the radio, they're going to get into that hook because, you know, they might be in the car, they might be speaking with someone, you know, they're going to recognize that instantly. What can I do in mastering to help that along? That's really important. That's probably like just the way my brain has learned to digest that information when I get a mix. Because the thing is, with mixers, I get them in all shapes and sizes and forms, from mixing engineers who've been doing it for decades, working on big records, to kids on their laptop in their bedrooms. I'll get mixers from to master. And I can't be super, like, I can't judge. Oh no, I can judge mixers, but I just choose not to judge the mixers on, you know, or judge the person on their ability. But I sort of try and think, okay, what is this music trying to do? How can I help them get the most out of where they're at this stage? Because, like, you know, some of the mixers and producers I work for, who are really good fucking top level guys, I can go to and I can say, hey, you know, the subs are moving around a little bit around this frequency. Have you thought about doing XYZ with the multiband compressor before we start mastering it? You know, just to tighten it up, or you know, there's a little bit of sibilance at 6.7 kilohertz, and you know, it's a bit hard. You know, I can go through that process with them, and they'll make changes I need.
Yep.
If it's a singer-songwriter, say, and they're doing it at home, I won't go to that level of detail. I'll sort of go, okay, they haven't been able to recognize a few things, you know, because they're putting together music. They're not mixing full time. How can I help this get as close to where it needs to go in mastering? And you know, that might mean me having a conversation going, okay, well, we've got these few things going on. The vocals sound really good. They're a little bit edgy, but I also know you want a bright sounding track. You know, do you want something that's a bit brighter and a bit quieter, or would you like something where we can sort of tame that top end and bring the overall volume up a little bit louder with a bit of a beefier bass? You know, like, you know, you sort of got to cut hairs there and take the path of least resistance, so to speak, because you don't want to end up butchering what they've done in the same respect.
Yeah, I like how you make it simple, because it isn't really. I mean, it is technically, it can be like, it's very complicated, But I like how, like, straight off the bat, you're like, is this in a club? Is this streaming? I know we've done a few sessions, and like that's like the first thing you ask me. You're like, where are people going to hear this most? And then that's where you kind of tailor the master for. So, you know, a lot of my stuff's kind of like streaming based. So it's kind of like, well, you're going to master it for those platforms, which is really good.
More so than the platforms, the people on those platforms and what they expect to hear and what connects with them. Like, we'll put it this way. Let's say I didn't ask those questions. Okay. And I just mastered it to what I thought would sound the best. And the client gets it back or you get it back and you're like, fuck, this sounds awesome. And we're all happy. But then it goes out into the real world and it doesn't resonate with the people it's meant to resonate with. What point is it in making it sound like that? Like you listen to like, what's her name? Billie Eilish's stuff. Like there's some wild fucking shit in her albums, which you're like, that should not be there.
Yeah.
Like, distorted and stereo bass. What the fuck's going on? No way. But it connects with the listener. It captures the listener.
Yeah.
So imagine if I was the mastering engineer and I put like an elliptical filter. An elliptical filter monos the low end. Imagine if I did that on one of Billie Eilish's records.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have it wouldn't have that same energy, that same impact on the listener. It'd be like, what the fuck? No, nobody would want to. So that's why I'm so much more. I'm so much more concerned with who listens to the music, because that's how it performs. If my client's music doesn't perform well, if it doesn't connect with people, if it doesn't get those people following the artist and seeing what their next releases are and, you know, going to their shows and stuff, then my artists who are hiring me won't be making any money off their music. And if they're not, then it just, you know, my vested interest is making sure whatever they're putting out serves them the best. So, you know, that's more important than me being a snobby mastering engineer, audio freak going, oh, this frequency, that frequency, you know what I mean? Except in the exception of where I'm working with mixers and producers who can help through that. But for the most part, it's about the feel of it.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're always thinking about the listener and like the end kind of consumer, which is 101. I mean, that's 101 advice for any field, really. Like, what does the consumer want? That's spot on. Couldn't have said it better myself. I was going to say one more thing before we wrap up. Just advice, like mixing and mastering advice for anyone who wants to start. Because, like, you know, I'm sure there's so many people that just want to like dive more into this field. And like, where would you say start? Like, I don't know.
I would start by this isn't going to be very specific advice other than just start mixing whatever you have.
Yeah, right.
So you got a production, you got a song, mix it.
Yeah.
And the most important thing is that you set yourself a deadline. By that deadline, you don't touch it again.
Yeah.
Like you're done with it.
I like that.
Because something that's happened to me is that over the years, I've mixed more and more records. And it's sort of like maybe the first year I might have mixed 12 records. The next year I might have mixed 24. But what I'm finding is I'm getting more growth in my mixing skills later on in my career when I'm mixing 60, 70 releases a year, as opposed to when I was mixing 10.
Yeah.
So if I had any advice for me when I was starting out, I'd say, you know, do your client's work, do those 12, but then find another 20 or 30 freebies that you can either do for others or just of your own music that I could have finished off, because the quicker you finish the mixes, because what happens is people will focus on one mix. I'll keep doing the same mix over and over and over and over and over and over and over, trying to perfect it, but they don't learn anything because they never come to an end.
Yeah. That's like producing, man. Like if every time I finish new tracks, I always learn more and more. You just get stuck in this rabbit hole of going in circles. It's really important. Yeah.
So my thing would be start mixing, set a date. Once it hits that date, don't ever mix it again. Just move to the next one.
Yeah. No, that is spot on. I would highly recommend that because deadlines, man. Deadlines are the biggest one. And it's so I guess I get in such a rut with production. I'm always like, can be produced better, it can be, you know, and as soon as there's a timeline or deadline on it, it's like, okay, shit, this is it. So that's where you learn your most.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So I hope somebody takes it on board and does it. You know who does that well? I'm not sure if they've been a guest on the podcast. Tay Piggott.
Oh no, I haven't. I tell you yet. Yeah, okay.
He's actually started doing a little bit of mixing himself.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah, right.
And like at the start, it was like I Love You, Tay, if you're listening. It was in the rough. It was in the rough stages. Great songs. Anybody who knows Tay knows he's a great songwriter. Puts together incredible stuff.
Yeah.
At the start, it was a bit like, okay, I think the first thing he learned very quickly was that I don't think he was actually writing bass parts.
Ah, yes.
So like it would be this incredible arrangement. The piano would be great, and it'd be like, Tay, like, there's nothing balancing the vocals in the low end. There's no energy there. So then, now he puts like an octave on the left hand of the piano, so we can get that low note. And then he learned that, and it's probably been the last 9 or so months.
Right. Yeah.
He's been in that rabbit hole, and it's been really good, because I've seen song after song after song that he's doing for himself or others, and you can hear it sort of starting to gel together, and him picking his things up. Now he's which one did he send me this morning? It had drums in it. So now he's starting to get the hang of like pulling drums into acoustic tracks and seeing how that can interact with the elements. And again, but he wouldn't be making that progression if he was still stuck on song 1.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's cool. You've seen that firsthand, like with him, like even
with him, like outside of myself, I've seen that amongst many producers and songwriters I work with. It's just that once they, first 6 months, first 12 months won't be your first half a decade of your career won't be your best work.
I know, right?
It's like if you look back on anything you've done a couple of years ago, it's like, what the fuck, like even you're proud of it at the time, and that's good, and you should stay proud by your decisions. But in the same respect, you learn, and you can. That's why I encourage people, finish up your projects, not for the sake of just finishing and being reckless and putting them out there, but just, for a little bit of self accountability, like be like, okay, I did this, I've committed to these decisions, this is where I'm at this point in time, I'm going to learn from it, move forward.
Nah, that's that's it, man. That is unreal advice. I think that's all we've got time for, but
that's all good.
Thanks heaps for jumping on this and really diving into it. I appreciate all the insight, and I'm glad we went a bit nerdy and technical with it, because like I feel like people might want to hear more of that. Like, instead of going broad, we went, really into the EQ and compression and mixing and mastering stages. So thanks, man. That's episode 4 wrapped up. You can follow Nick on Instagram, Panorama _mastering. If you ever need mixes or masterers, you are a masterer. You are a master at your craft. Go to Nick. He's also got a website. Is it Panorama Mastering, your website?
Yeah.
It's Panorama Mastering. Hit him up. He's amazing at his craft. Thanks again, man. I really appreciate it. And I hope people got a little bit out of this one. So, thanks for joining.
No worries. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for listening to Coffee with Carda. I hope you enjoyed this episode. You can check out my music on Spotify by searching Carda, and feel free to reach out to me on Instagram @Carda Music on what you thought of the episode. I'll see you next time.